The hard question I'd like to ask the Israelis is about the death count. You've got about 30 to 35,000 people killed so far, something like this.
Yeah.
The Israelis will consistently go, we forewarn that we're going to do strikes. It's unavoidable. And they're using that as a cover as far as I can see, because in reality, they're clearly doing two types of strikes. Ones where they forewarn and ones where they don't warn.
Gaza is one of the most surveilled places anywhere in the world. You have drones that are flying 24 hours a day. You have the coordinates of the buildings, from the press to the hospitals, to everyone. As a Muslim, nobody has the right to steal the land of somebody else and then keep it, and then I find that as an acceptable decision or an acceptable conclusion. So do I accept the right of Israel to occupy that land?
Yeah.
I don't.
I've just spent 3 hours doing this with somebody who I couldn't get a dialogue going with, and I really value the conversations we have. So
I do value our conversations too.
I value our conversations. I like to make
your friend can join us if he wants to.
Yeah, come in if you want. Are we doing Israel Palestine?
No, I'm just saying that you touched on. That's fine. I mean,
I think it.
No, I'm just saying that because you brought up that you saw the debates between Finkelstein and Dershowitz.
Yeah.
And that Dershowitz, though he is a self-confessed Zionist, he's written a book. I think maybe several books, but certainly the Case for Israel was his book that was being discussed at the on the video, the first debate that they had, I believe, or one of the first that they had.
Yeah. And then he did two with Piers Morgan.
Yeah, that's right. And that Dershowitz actually said, he agrees that the religious aspect of the Jews claiming, or Israelis claiming, that this land should be theirs, that he doesn't agree with.
He doesn't agree with.
And also the settlements he doesn't agree with.
Yeah, so if you want to fact check this, I'm trying to bring information to actually help the debate.
Yeah, sorry.
If you want to...
Okay, which way? Okay, you're moving. Okay. No, but our friend Tony Tony's got itchy feet. Tony moves around a lot.
Sorry, I'll try not.
You must stay fixed, Tony.
Sorry, if you want to fact check this, go and watch Piers Morgan's debate between Finkelstein and Dershowitz, the third one.
Yeah.
And I've got the time codes here, but I'll have to sift through. But trust me, Dershowitz rejects the God idea as a basis of the state of Israel. Yeah. And I think about 40 minutes in, he also condemns the expanded settlements categorically. Yeah. Now, when you've got an advocate like Dershowitz who is arguing your case with you, it's worth knowing and having on the record.
I would agree to some extent. However, for me, it actually doesn't matter what anybody says.
That's okay.
Unless I put the caveat in.
Good.
Unless they can back it up with actions. If their actions are opposite to the words that they speak, then I believe that that's what you call a forked tongue. And with Dershowitz, I'm afraid he also argues that the IDF does not deliberately target civilians, which is, I would say, evidentially a lie. It's utter deception.
I'm not saying that I agree with everything Dershowitz says. I'm just breaking it down into individual statements. I understand. Which I think is a more constructive way of going in.
Right, but when I judge a character of an individual, or I judge their, let's say, their sincerity and their honesty or their integrity, if they say that they don't agree with the religious concept of Jews or Israelis justifying their occupation because of their divine book, and they argue that they don't support the illegal settlements, yet they don't condemn the mass killing of innocent Palestinians and the subjugation and the oppression of those Palestinians, then for me that person is no longer worthy of holding the title of sincere or honest or worthy of actually having as an advocate, because I believe that their crimes or the crimes that they conceal are far greater than the small concessions that they've made on certain other points.
Okay, I think we're answering different questions here. I think you're answering the question, what is Dershowitz's ethical character? Yeah?
No, I'm saying that you said having somebody or knowing about somebody who advocates certain things that I accept as I would say as a more balanced and fair-minded individual than Dershowitz, because I don't believe that I am a supporter of Palestinians per se, or that I'm a supporter of Israelis or Jews per se. I would say that I'm a supporter of what is ethically and morally acceptable to do.
Good, me
And
too.
so if a Muslim kills an innocent Jew, I find it not only easy to condemn that, but I'm instructed to do so by my own religion.
Good.
Now, similarly, if a Jew does that to a Muslim, I condemn it again. I condemn it again.
Right. So we both condemn it because it's unethical in and of itself.
Exactly.
It's not a tribal affiliation.
And from your perspective, that would be perhaps a moral view based upon your nurture, your nature, your consensus, or whatever it might be.
Fitra, I'll go there.
Right? And for me, that would be something that perhaps I would perceive to be more profound, which is that this is more profound in a sense that I would engage the entity God Almighty as instructing me to.
Okay.
So even if my heart were to become corrupted because of worldly influences, I have something much greater that would keep me in check, so that I'm not allowed to justify it because, they did horrible things to me, or they did horrible things to us.
Are we wanting right now to do ethics or metaphysics or what?
No,
or politics?
I'm saying that the decision being made in terms of wrong or right, from a Muslim's perspective, should be one that's connected to the Creator and what the Creator has deemed to be right or wrong.
Okay, so we may disagree about some of the small print to do with the Creator and God, but we agree on the ethical principle, We agree people have a moral compass.
Yes.
They should try and strive to make decisions which align with it, and will condemn anybody who does or doesn't, independent of their tribe.
Yes.
So far, we're totally on the same page. This is great.
Yeah.
So now, with regard to Israel, Palestine.
So with Dershowitz, let me just qualify that. The reason why I am completely against people like Dershowitz is that I believe that they deliberately, and I would say go against profound, undeniable evidence that supports the view that the Israelis, the IDF, and the government of Israel deliberately target civilians and deliberately, has deliberately engaged in destroying the most fundamental human rights that we're all.
I didn't mention this because I was wanting to sing. I didn't want to sing the praises of Dershowitz.
No problem.
Okay. Also, I don't want to automatically condemn him 100%. Fine. Dershowitz to me is someone who defended Klaus von Bülow.
Yes.
He defended O.J. Simpson.
That's right.
Yeah. And he defended somebody else appalling as well. And then he got a film made where he made himself the lead character and looked like a liberal hero.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Okay. And he's connected with the Kardashians.
I don't know, but he has many connections. And to Epstein as well. I think he was a friend of
I don't think he's a moral paragon.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
That's a given.
That's fine.
However, in the interest of persuading people who are listening to discussions, it's worth, if you're an Israeli supporter, noticing when someone who is normally on your side is saying something like, I condemn the expanded settlements. As a single point in and of itself, that's a fact worth knowing, yes?
Right. Okay.
So if you're an Israeli and you're thinking the expanded settlements are fine, be aware there are critics of that position who are very much in your own camp, including Dershowitz.
In fact, many Jews are. And as you might know, many of the advocates on the peace advocacy and the human rights organizations are Jewish,
right?
Who are fighting for Palestinian rights.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that should be noted, I think, and that should be, it should be acknowledged. Yeah.
Okay. Can I pitch into what I think are hard questions?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. A hard question for the Israelis, and a hard question, I think, for the Palestinians. Okay. The hard question I'd like to ask the Israelis is about the death count. You've got about 30 to 35,000 people killed so far, something like this.
Yeah.
The Israelis will consistently go, we forewarn that we're going to do strikes. It's unavoidable. And they're using that as a cover as far as I can see, because in reality, they're clearly doing two types of strikes. Ones where they forewarn and ones where they don't warn. So the question I want to know from Israel is, what percentage of the body count is down to forewarned strikes and what percentage is down to warned strikes? Because I think realistically, probably 90% of the casualties that are happening are not forewarned, they're just dropping bombs. So I'd like them to answer that question. They seem to know the stats, and they keep ducking it and making out that they're forewarning people. Yeah?
I mean, I think the evidence is quite profound, and you have multiple testimonies of people who are saying, including doctors and surgeons from international, organizations, who are saying that we are giving the Israelis the coordinates of the safe house of where the doctors are, and even those locations are being bombed.
They can get hit. Okay.
Well, you see, the thing is this now. I can't accept can get hit or collateral damage or it's an accident.
Tell me a bit of slack here. I'm trying to argue on your side.
But I'll tell you why. And I'll explain to you why, Tony. I'll explain to you why, Tony. Gaza is one of the most surveilled places anywhere in the world. You have drones that are flying 24 hours a day. You have the coordinates of the buildings from the press to the hospitals to everyone. The Israelis, the IDF know exactly where these buildings are. They know the transportation of the people as they move around. So just as the kitchen, the international kitchen, that the people that were killed along that route, it's quite obvious that this was not an accident. It was quite obvious that this was a deliberate attack.
I think you're preaching to the converted.
Right.
My point was, in mainstream news programs for 6 months, I'm not seeing the interviewer ask the Israelis how much of the body count is attributable to what attacks where you didn't forewarn them of the strike. Because whenever there's a body count, Israelis goes, we give them a forewarning.
Yeah, it's all
and
nonsense.
I believe no, I don't think it's all nonsense. I think it's more nuanced. I think they do give forewarning in a percentage of situations, and there's another percentage of situations where they don't. And the body count we're worried about is almost exclusively coming from the latter
You see, I'll
category.
tell you why.
You take my point.
Yeah, but I'll tell you why I contest that point.
Wow.
Because if I were to receive a warning that my building is about to be bombed by the IDF,
You will get out.
now, the question arises, are those families just deciding, no, we're just going to stay here, get the barbecue on, let's have a barbecue before we... No, you would expect reasonably, they would be leaving those buildings immediately. Now, if a lot of the times these warnings were being given and they were being precise in their bombings, then these would be empty buildings that would be going down.
Well, I don't understand why you're objecting to my point. My point was very simple. Israel, I think, is using a PR coverage
I agree.
of saying we'll do a certain number of strikes
I
which are
agree.
preemptive, which are forewarned, and then whenever anybody questions us on the body count, we will accurately say, yeah, we do those kind of attacks.
Yeah, I mean, so it's
but
just-
we'll backdoor the fact that nearly all the body count is coming from different types of attack.
Yeah.
So I want to see a newscaster addressing an Israeli representative and asking them that question.
Well, they
What
won't,
is the
will
body
they?
count?
A lot of the time they won't.
If you put the question into general circulation through lower level stuff like this, it's a good question.
Well, you have to understand how the media works, and I'm sure you're a very clever man.
Try and be an idealist.
No, but look.
If there's a chance there's anybody in a
look,
bigger
look
media
what happened to
outlet
the
asking,
LBC.
ask the damn question.
Look at what happened to the LBC. What was her name?
Abbas.
Sangeeta, was it right?
Abbas.
What
If
if
it's a good question which will expose the Israeli government to legitimate criticism, please help me promote the question. That's a reasonable request. I'm trying to help.
Tony, the point here is this:
What?
that even if you were to ask that question,
I am asking.
they could say we do not strike anybody deliberately, and that this is
No, the question I asked is, if we've got 30,000 dead people, how many of them died in strikes that you warned about, and how many died in strikes you didn't? It's a very clear question.
We don't know.
Well, I love the fact you're going to preempt the answer, but normally they can give you clear stats on figures and deaths and bomb drops. I would like them to give me a figure, please. I'd like that circulated in the news so we can discuss it, because it's going to be nearly all of the deaths were not forewarned.
The problem is, for me, I don't trust anything they say. They've been caught so many times.
So I shouldn't even ask them a good question
No,
anymore.
I'm not saying that.
So
Look,
can you help me to ask the
fine,
question?
let's ask the question.
Thank you.
Okay, let's
That's
ask
all
the
I
question.
want.
That's fine.
So that's the difficult question for the
understand.
Israelis. Now here's a difficult question for
Yeah,
the
okay.
Palestinians.
I don't think it's going to be difficult because they'll just deny it. But
Okay.
anyway.
No, it's different. Denying
okay.
doesn't look good. In terms of persuading
Okay.
people, if I ask a simple question and they deny it and drop, there'll be certain people who are trying to make their minds up who'll go, I think they're f***ing around.
Okay. And you've got
Pardon
a
me for
difficult
swearing.
question for the Palestinians.
The difficult question for the Palestinians I want to know is, in the one-state solution which is being proposed,
Yes.
not Netanyahu's, because Netanyahu's is basically kick out the Palestinians and he calls it one state. That's abhorrent, that's no good, right? The one-state solution I believe the Palestinians are now promoting, and in my days of going on marches, it used to be two-state, and I'm noticing this shift to a one-state. In that one state, I want to know, are we talking about a democratic one state, or are we talking about a theocratic one state? And above all, here's the key question. What happens to the nuclear weapons? Israel's currently got a couple of dozen nuclear weapons, and if you're going to create this one state, me, and I think the whole planet, particularly now that the global nuclear powers are on the edge of more conflict, we would like to know what who's going to have the finger on the button of several dozen Israeli nuclear weapons. Are they suddenly going to be exported out of the country before the one state? Or are they going to stay inside the country? And if you've got an Arab majority or a Palestinian majority, will they end up with their finger on the button? That's an important question. I'm not hearing that.
The first thing is, we're talking about hypotheticals here.
Yeah, we're planning ahead for the future. If you're proposing one state, I need to know what it entails.
But it's a hypothetical situation, which I don't believe ever will arise.
Well, are you in favour of one or two states?
Well, I'll give you the reason why it will never happen. It won't happen because you'll have an Arab majority. And Israel was created by a predominantly European community as an ethnocentric religious state for the Jews alone. It was a racist, and it is a racist ideology, and it can only survive if the Jewish community or the Israelis maintain overall control and decisions based on everything. Now, if you have a one state, and you have the right to return of the people that were kicked out of their land, then the Arabs or the Palestinians actually become the majority, and the Israelis will never allow that to happen. It's obvious.
I agree. To me, it's obvious as well that Israel, with its back to the wall, would fire its nukes before it will give up to a one state. Okay. Hence, I advocate two states because Hamza Yusuf, I think I've seen on Lex Fredman expressing this very, very eloquently, and he says we need international laws to bind people, and he advocates a two-state solution. That way the Palestinian people, at least, they've got agency, they've got rights, they're recognised in the interim,
Well, the Palestinian people have already agreed to a two-state solution based on the 1967 borders, which is, by the way, in law, and everything that Israel has occupied since then is illegal occupied territory. So we already have a legal framework, and the Palestinian Authority has already agreed to that. Now, the point is this, and Anis, we've got the map there, haven't we? The map,
You want the map?
Yeah, I'd like to show it, because a map, I think, a picture speaks 1,000 words.
A picture's a good idea, but
the reality is, look, that we have to look at, even before the State of Israel was formed, that the very people that formed it
Hang on.
had an opinion that this is what was going to happen.
Wait,
right?
Abbas, I believe you're going to turn this into a very informative history lesson.
No, what I'm saying is that was the
question.
intention, right? That was the intention before the State of Israel, that Palestine, effectively, that was here, was going to become this, and now most of this is gone, and most of this is gone. And that was the intention from even the people who were the organizers, the funders of the land purchasing organizations, made it very clear that this was not going to be a state for two people. This was going to be a Jewish state for the Jews.
Abbas,
that was the plan from the beginning.
Abbas, it may or may not have been. I'm not contesting what you're saying. I'm just saying it doesn't pertain to my question.
No. So
My question was, more and more people now, you like two-state, I like two-state. What I'm aware of from the marches is more and more people are suddenly saying one state. When they're proposing that, you do the hypothetical. You want to know what their agenda is and what their plan is. And the key question I need to ask people who are advocating a one-state solution is, what happens to the nukes? That's a very, very, very simple question. Do you realise that's an important question? Can you recognise it's an important question?
It would only be an important question
if you got a one state.
No, if there was ever going to be a possibility of there being a one state.
No, you and I don't think that's possible.
Right.
More to the point, I don't think it's desirable, at least not now. Maybe in a generation's time. So for the minute, I think it's neither desirable nor possible. Nonetheless, given we're communicating with a bunch of people who wholeheartedly advocate one state, I'd like to put that hard question to them. Just as I want the Israelis to ask, what's with this death count? I want the one-state solution people to tell me what their plan is for the nukes.
Well, you can ask them that. I mean, and to be honest, for me, it's like I don't mind. I don't mind looking at hypotheticals.
We have to.
But if I feel, based upon the evidence that I see, that it's like literally pigs flying, man, jumping and landing on the moon.
I agree and you agree, but how do we persuade the one-state solution people who are a rising tide that they're backing the wrong cause?
I wouldn't even enter that conversation personally.
Why not?
Well, because I think if they're really insisting on a one-state solution, then for me, they don't understand the conflict.
Okay, but then as somebody who's got a platform and is taken seriously and you're eloquent and nice, okay, you're in a position to do a bit of persuading. And I think you're a good guy to listen to, so can you not offer them anything?
Well, what I will offer is this. It's not for me to decide.
I'm not suggesting you decide.
No, I understand.
Just present your argument.
I understand.
Objectively.
So for me, I'm not saying one state, I'm not saying two states, I'm not saying anything. What I'm saying is that the Palestinian people have a right to decide how they want to live their lives.
That wasn't being contested.
I understand.
What is being contested is they're at a road, they're in a fork in the road, and they can choose to go one of two ways: one state or two state. There are merits and advantages and disadvantages to either direction. You have an opinion, I have an opinion, and what you do in these forums is debate them and present them.
Yeah, my opinion is...
And I think the arguments against one state are very strong.
Okay, I agree, but my argument...
Okay, so you agree on that
I agree that the one state is a pie in the sky. It's not going to happen. It's not even worth considering, because the Israelis will never allow that to happen. But the two-state solution is the only... What seems logically feasible is a two-state solution.
Okay.
Now, the only reason I'm going with that is because the Palestinian people themselves seem to be more inclined to want a two-state solution. And there is already a legal framework in place that actually supports... Through the United Nations.
If America didn't keep vetoing it, you could make the damn thing happen.
Right, exactly. Right.
And the tide of opinion in America is now at a tipping point.
It is.
So you don't want to alienate that opinion now, because it can carry Biden over. You know what I mean?
So there is a framework.
Yeah.
And the Palestinians themselves who should decide their fate, because it's their lives, and they have what seems to me, they've appreciated, they've realized that actually, and what they want is that two-state solution. And since the United Nations and most of the world, and when we say most of the world, we're talking about virtually everyone, has agreed that the 1967 borders should be respected, that a country may not occupy and keep land through war, and that those lands have to be returned back to the Palestinian people.
Okay.
Now, what is the realistic chance of that happening? And I think, unfortunately, very little.
I happen to agree with you, but ethically it seems like the thing to aim for. Okay, so as long as it's the ethical ideal, we keep our eye on that ball. And then you look at how you can change the pragmatic lay of the land.
Well, actually, tell you what,
the tragic potential outcome is, I might be reading this wrong. I sense that more and more Palestinians are thinking in terms of one state.
Yeah.
Now, you think it pragmatically can't be achieved, and I agree. I think that lesson could be learned a very, very hard way through profound conflict. And the one-state solution,
unfortunately,
if they're forewarned of that, because I think there's a tide there where they're thinking, we're on the edge, the planet is turning, Israel's going to give in. Israel, with a couple of dozen nukes in its pocket, ain't going to give in. And with a military force that strong, it ain't going to give in. So unless you want a bloodbath, you need to start reframing your solution.
The unfortunate thing here is, this conflict has just started. That's the sad reality. There is no way and throughout history, if history has taught us anything, is that this level of barbaric brutality is always met with brutality in return.
Yeah, it's a problem.
And violence breeds violence.
Yeah.
And you now have a people who have a valid reason to fight back, as they have had for the last 75 years. And it is only a matter of time that the conflict will, unfortunately, raise its head again. And I fear the consequences, because I don't believe the Israeli army has the technology or the will to defeat many of the forces if they were to get together and fight Israel. The only way that Israel would be able to hold its ground would be with America and the other allies that England or whatever may help it.
Right.
Otherwise, it's finished. And unfortunately,
as long as we believe that the Hammers Charter, and am I wrong? The 1988 Hammers Charter, I think, calls for the complete dissolution,
which has been revised, which has been revised many times, in fact.
And in which updated charter?
And they've recognized that they're willing to concede, because you see, this is a very. I'll give you one other example regarding this issue. Sometimes I'm asked, do you accept the right of Israel to exist?
It's a good question.
Right? And the reality, as a Muslim, nobody has the right to steal the land of somebody else and then keep it. And then I find that as an acceptable decision or an acceptable conclusion. So do I accept the right of Israel to occupy that land?
Yeah.
I don't.
You don't?
But as Gandhi said, and I'm not a big fan of Gandhi, when Pakistan was, had its independence from India, he said, I don't accept the legitimacy of Pakistan.
But pragmatically?
But I accept the reality of it.
Okay.
So in the same way, I don't accept the legitimacy of Israel because it's occupied land. There were other people living there, regardless of who signed what and what documents exchanged and what envelopes exchanged hands. I don't accept the legitimacy of Israel.
Sure.
But the reality is the people are there now. They've been there for generations.
Well, this is
and what's the solution now? And it may be a solution that may not be fair necessarily, and it may not necessarily be just. But you have to sometimes work with what you have.
I'm very glad you're saying this. I'm constantly here trying to get people to focus on the statute of limitations. Okay? The key question to me, ethically, across the board, is how long before conquest just becomes legitimate occupation in international law? At what point do you let history become history? And I think everybody needs to meditate on that question and reach some kind of consensus, and then form international laws and international framework to accommodate.
Well, as you said, you have to be pragmatic. And that means that if the consequence of undoing the occupation results in potentially greater loss of life and greater evil and greater destruction, then it may be better to leave, from an Islamic point of view, leave the justice part to God and be pragmatic and discuss peace in a way that is fair, not only for the Palestinians and the Israelis, but I would say to every natural, reasonable, fair-minded individual. And most people have made the decision on this point that Israel should move back to the 1967 borders, that there should be an independent army, whether it's a UN or whoever, that instills and enforces peace, i.e., no border inclusions, right? Incursions, right? And allow the Palestinians to have their airport, allow them to have their freedom, allow them to be able to travel in their land
and trade,
and
have an economy and be independent,
and basically have the things that you and I all want to have,
and join NATO,
whatever it might be.
No,
right?
Seriously,
maybe
joining. Can you imagine if they joined NATO?
You know
Can you
what?
imagine?
NATO has its own problems, right? So
nonetheless, if you were inside NATO and any country attacked you, the whole of NATO would have
but
to attack that country.
it just seems to me, as a Muslim,
Yeah.
that, when Ukraine was being invaded by Russia, that we had people saying, oh, they look like us, blonde, blue-eyed. I'll open up my home, let the families come and live in my own home. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying that your level of empathy should remain consistent.
I think it should, ideally.
I think that it's impossible.
Ideally,
look,
it should.
The reality is that as a white man, as a Western man, you may have more of an affiliation to another white Western man.
I don't want to encourage. I don't want to encourage that in myself.
Let me just explain to you and qualify that. I don't think that's wrong.
I do.
I'll tell you why I don't think that's wrong.
I think it's not aspirational.
I'll tell you why it's not wrong. I don't think it's wrong because your familiarity of language, of culture, of race,
distorts.
Hold on a second. May allow you to have a greater connection to that individual than somebody, let's say, of my colour, if I was born in the Middle East or whatever.
I totally get that point.
You understand my point?
Can I respond?
But hold on, let me just qualify that though, please. Sorry.
Okay.
However, if that disparity of empathy, of connection, is so extreme that here you have a Palestinian child being blown apart, is less empathetic to you than a dog being killed in your country.
It's gone too far.
Then you got a problem.
We agree.
And you need to have some introspection as to what you've become.
Okay, well then
that's what
I'm more of an ethical absolutist than you are then. I think all souls are equal, therefore all people are equal. Therefore, I should aspire to empathise with everybody as equally as possible.
Is that possible to do?
I didn't say it was possible. I'm identifying the ideal.
So I'm a realist then?
Hang on.
You're not being a realist.
No. Life is about doing two things. Identifying the ideal and then realistically looking at the landscape you're in. And then travelling in the realistic landscape as close to the ideal as you can travel.
Right.
I don't identify an ideal because I think I'll achieve it. I aim for the moon so that I can hit...
So I think we both agree on that then, really.
Well, yeah, but it's therefore important to agree on the fundamental ideal, which is steering our moral compass. And my fundamental ideal is absolute equality is the truth of thing in the eyes of God.
Well, no, I didn't say absolute equality. Equality, yes. But I'm saying...
I don't think my tribe is special in reality.
No, I don't believe you should either. And nor should I.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that I'm talking about empathy.
Yeah.
I'm talking about that connection that you might have. So when people were very empathetic to white Ukrainians who were being bombed by Russia, I get it. I understand that.
Mm-hmm. I understand but it's not ideal.
I understand it, that in the ideal world, if such a thing ever existed, that you would want people to have the exact same amount of empathy for everybody.
The point of the ideal world is it has never and never will exist.
Exactly.
It's not the point.
That's my point.
But it's functionally essential. You integrate it with the pragmatic world.
Well, okay. So maybe I do agree in some parts and maybe not in some. But what I'm saying is that what upsets me is that the disparity between the suffering of a Ukrainian,
I agree,
and the disparity between the suffering of a Palestinian,
I agree,
or an African, or an Asian, or an Arab, is so extreme that on the one side, that level of brutality, utter contempt for human life, is actually justified, is in some quarters celebrated, whilst on the other side, there is this overflowing level of empathy and love and tears and emotions that are flowing.
Dude, we agree.
You know, and I find that very disturbing.
So do I. It's just I'm more of an ethical absolutist than you. As I said, I think I can understand why I have more why it's easier for me to associate with people who speak the same language as me and move in the same sort of social circles and cultural circles. They're the people I have more direct access to, so they become more three-dimensional to me.
Right, exactly.
That's inevitable.
Yeah.
But for me to take that experience, which is unavoidable, and then mean that I think that means they actually are more three-dimensional than other people I've never met, is to misinterpret reality.
Yeah.
So I've got to counterbalance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you use your intellect to override the natural, maybe tendencies.
And hopefully your moral compass.
I agree.
Great. We agree on the goal to aim for. Okay, so that's all good. We got two-state solution. So statute of limitations. I'm kicking around the idea that. Okay, here's the question. the American Indians, I keep asking this. We agree that they were invaded. We agree it was immoral. We agree it was a genocide. We all agree it happened. Should America return America to the Indians? What do you think?
If you ask me as a moral
As
question,
an ethical question you will put to the American government,
yeah,
should
so
they?
if you say as an ethical, moral question,
Yeah.
anything that is stolen is still the property of the one that it is stolen from, and either they receive compensation or they receive the items that were stolen from them.
Okay.
Now, again, you have to be pragmatic.
Now, this
about
was 150 years
Of course,
ago, which
of
is
course.
twice the amount of time
Of course.
from the Declaration
Yes.
of the State of Israel,
Now,
which makes it interesting.
Yeah. Now, however, there's something very interesting here.
Good.
Because after the Second World War,
Yeah.
the global consensus was that we need to all get together and we need to make a decision.
League of Nations. First World War League of
Right.
Nations, Second World United Nations.
United Nations,
Yeah.
right? We need to come with a legal framework
Agreed.
that we all globally abide by.
Good idea.
So we don't have another Dresden,
Yeah.
right?
We agree that's a good idea?
Yeah, I think that of course it's a good idea.
Great.
Coming together
Great.
and discussing peaceful terms which are fair and just,
Yes.
right? To all parties.
Yeah. With equanimity.
With some, with equality, of course, right? Now, so Israel being formed after the Second World War and being submitted to, should be submitted to, the boundaries that were globally agreed to by the global consensus. I think
In
there's
what year? When? What
so
global consensus?
1947, 1948.
So after the Declaration of the
after
State.
After the Second World War, there was an agreement that nations are no longer allowed to occupy land that they take from in war.
Okay.
And there was a reason why we did that, obviously. Because the era of conquest was an endless, and Europe, as we know, had these endless conflicts and wars, and the First and the Second World War were hundreds of millions of people lost their lives. So it was precisely to prevent such a thing from arising again, that there were certain fundamental laws that everybody was expected to abide by.
Right, so we agree it's a good plan.
Right. But Israel, obviously, so this is why it really upsets me and angers me, in fact, when you have Israelis pointing to Dresden, which happened before the United Nations were formed.
Sure.
So you're basically saying, before we all agreed, Britain did some really bad things, so if we do some bad things, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, because the UN was a reaction to the atrocities of things like Dresden and Hiroshima, which were morally questionable.
Exactly.
Right.
So this is where the Palestinians, I feel, have an extra tier of let's say, force to say, well, hold on a second. All right, before that, we didn't have the agreement, and it depended very much on your social consensus of your people. If you thought it was moral to go and invade another country, well, okay, you thought it was moral. If people were Christian or Jew or Muslim, they could go to their text and either justify certain things or reject certain things, right?
Yeah.
But everybody was making up their own decision on this point. But now we're going to come together and we're going to make a global decision that the very things that Israel is engaging in are illegal and will not be tolerated. There will be repercussions, i.e. sanctions.
Yeah.
Now, what's happened since, though, Tony?
I'm not clear if you're including the setting up of the State of Israel in 48 within that infringement.
Well, it is, because remember,
so that was also an infringement.
Because 1967, especially 67, if you look at the Nakba and you look at the other things, these things are after the United Nations was formed. The 1967 greater expansion was after the agreements were in place, the legal framework was in place. So under international law...
Well, hang on, 67, if I was Israeli, I would argue that was land gain in reaction to an attack on them.
But it's illegal. But under international law, that's illegal.
Yeah, so they gave it back.
No, they didn't.
Well, actually, they didn't give it all back. They pulled out of Egypt again.
Yeah, but they didn't give up most of it, right?
Okay.
My point is that so now the international community has a global framework and a legal framework. And this is why, Israel doesn't have a leg to stand on. Because it is in violation of those very fundamental, explicit laws that you cannot occupy land and you cannot build on occupied land. and that these settlements are illegal.
Hang on, are you talking about the expanded settlements?
And
now?
well, not just the expanding settlements, but the extra land that Israel has occupied.
See what we agree on. The
since
expanded settlements
Right.
we condemn, yeah? The UN condemns it. The only reason it's going down is because America vetoes.
Yeah.
Yeah? The actual expansion and legitimacy of the state of Israel itself now, according to your argument, it shouldn't have been set up either because it was still a land grab.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, pragmatically, you seem to think 75 to 80 years later, you're willing to say it's the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, I think that ultimately it's the right of my Palestinian brothers and sisters, Muslims, Christians, Jews, whoever they might be, to decide their own fate when it comes to their freedom. And from what I have learnt is that they are predominantly in acceptance of this two-state solution, back to the 1967 borders, where they have complete autonomy, where they run their country as they want to run
If
their
we
country.
ask people now, if we temperature tested the people at speakers, there's, I don't know, a couple of hundred Muslims out here, Arabs here, my guess is most of them would say one state. Now, I may be wrong because you're more...
I don't know.
You're more engaged with this than I am, but I'm quite surprised that you think most people are still two-state.
I think that, I think, to be fair, it really doesn't matter what the people here think or what I think. Ultimately, what do the Palestinians want? And if that is what they want and they're happy with...
Well, insofar as the people here may be a mirror of the Palestinian people.
Then I support them on that. Then I support the Palestinians to have what they want to have.
So if they want a one state, you'll support that? Even if you think it's just going to result in a kind of a bloodbath or it's not doable, you still go
I would
charge the barricades.
I would advise
and
them. I would advise them against it, and I would hope that they would be able to persuade me that it can be somehow pulled off, where it would be the lesser of two evils. And if they persuade me, I'm open. I'm open to change my mind, but I would like to see the evidence for that. Tony, for me though, fundamentally, these are very interesting topics.
Yeah.
But for me, fundamentally, I think if anybody now supports Israel, I think they fall into two camps. Either they are willfully ignorant of what's happening through choice, because there's too much evidence and information out there to still remain ignorant. So you're either ignorant by choice or you are a racist.
I'm